Welcome to Beyond the Business Card podcast.
I'm not going to succeed if I go that route because there's just no leg to stand on. I was like, we're going to drown instantly. There's not a chance. That first year, cash is king. To get the cash, we need to get the jobs. To get the jobs, we need to better compete. We pocketed 500 dirhams each or something. But at least we knew that we had a year. The rent was done. The licensing was done. When I started the company, you are entirely correct. We had 0 clients. It was cold calls, emails, WhatsApps, going on websites, literally going and knocking on potential clients' doors in person.
Failure, resilience, then liftoff. Saudi budgets, integrated teams, and a ruthless focus on delivery. George built RAPT differently. Here's the blueprint.
And the budget was, from memory, like 30, 40,000 dirhams. And to me at the time, I wasn't making that in 3 months as a freelancer. So to me, I was mind blown. And I think that looking back, that was really needed. That was the first bit of you can do this. Just keep pushing. You got this. The profit will follow passion.
Hi guys, welcome back to Beyond the Business Card podcast. It's me, your host, Justin Maguire. And today I have a very interesting guest for you. Today I have George Dale, founder and CEO of RAPT. Now, RAPT are a production house. They specialize in sports, but George is going to tell us more about what type of sports, what type of projects they work on. George is an early stage entrepreneur, and I wanted to get him on because I wanted the people to see what it's like, I suppose, to kind of set up a business when you haven't really set up a business before. And I'll get onto the skin of that as well. George, hopefully, will be big inspiration for you guys out there. He's about to take on a very competitive market out here. I'm going to come back and explore this in a couple of years' time to see if George is good for his word. So I hope you're ready for this, George. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly of what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I'm the old hat here. He's the young upstart. Let's see how it goes. George, good to see you.
Good to see you, mate. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. And now I never do anyone justice, I think, in an intro. So,
sure. Yeah, it's tough. I understand that.
So can you, it's hard when you're not that person.
Yes. Yeah. Nobody knows it quite as well as the person that is in that seat. So yeah, sure. I mean, we at RAPT, we're trying to do things a bit differently. Between myself and my creative director, we've seen the media industry here, or more so the production industry, from many different vantage points. And it's really opened our eyes and allowed us to understand obviously the opportunities within the industry, but also the pitfalls and the bottlenecks that happen throughout. And I think that working as a freelancer allowed me to engage with lots of different production companies of different sizes, different niches, different capacities, if you will. And in doing so, unfortunately, it revealed a lot of the darker side, the Wild West of the UAE's production industry, or the GCC's production industry. So from there with RAPT, what we want to do is really kind of set the record straight in our own way, where we can't change the whole industry, but we can do our part, right? So whether that comes down to treating freelancers correctly or treating extended talent correctly, payment on time, making sure you're handling your cash flow in order to benefit the people that you're working with, delivery on time. And I think the biggest one that we found as well was the industry seems to forget that the client is right. And we heard so many horror stories or even being part of them, where that relationship between the client and the production company or agency falls apart. And it's often a part of ego, derived from timelines, budgetary constraints, that kind of thing. So with RAPT, we really wanted to make sure that we were doing things right. And I would just say further to that, the UAE sees a huge influx of very, very talented creatives on a yearly basis. And a lot of them move here with a dream of directing their first feature film, completing a photographic series, writing a book, whatever it might be. And time again, we've seen that dream die in favor of pursuing money. Because a lot of opportunity here, a lot of large clients with deep pockets. And so we see these directors who are incredibly creative and in any other part of the world would be writing that feature film. But here they're chasing the next big McDonald's ad, the next HSBC campaign. So we wanted to correct that as well and make sure that we stay true to our roots of why we entered the creative process, because it really does show in the final product on any project.
Gotcha. Now, George, you and I were talking off camera.
Yes.
You have been in the region since the year 2000, right?
Yes, correct. April 2000.
How old were you then?
5.
Okay. Wow. And you're from Plymouth in the UK?
Plymouth originally, yeah.
Okay. So just give us a bit of an understanding so we can, I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
be it in my role as a host of this podcast,
Yeah.
or also I've run it as you and I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got a successful recruitment business here.
Mhm.
I speak to a lot of business owners from there. I've noticed that often there's a real trend in business owners that, comes from their early days, comes from their parents,
Yeah.
comes from things that they found. Tell us a bit about your upbringing so we can have an understanding of that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I started schooling in Plymouth, as I mentioned, when I was about 4.
Yeah.
And moved over.
What do you remember about that, George?
Yeah, not much. I remember being stung by some nettles.
Yeah.
And I remember saying goodbye to the family dog when we moved here, which broke my heart. It's probably
Right.
why I have 2 now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I know through various memories, it's that weird thing where you don't know what you remember versus what your brain has filled in from what you've been told.
Yeah.
But I know that when we moved over initially, my dad came over for 2 months. He was friends with a guy called Alistair, who was in HSBC here. And my parents had spotted what I believe at the time was quite a vague opportunity. They saw something but didn't quite know what. So my dad came and stayed with Alistair, his friend from university, for 2 or 3 months and was essentially just scoping out the region, trying to understand what it looked like here. He secured a job, actually, funny enough, in marketing, which is not at all what he does. Came back to the UK and said, look, we've got a job. We've got an opportunity here. So my parents sold their house in the UK. My mum had a law firm in the UK, quite a junior one from what I understand. So she sold that and we moved over here, much to the reluctance of my grandparents, because obviously to them, my parents are pulling away their 5-year-old grandchild. And off we vanished to the desert, which they weren't very happy about. So I think there was quite a lot of reluctancy there. And I think through my life, that's taught me a lot in terms of, it's hard to not listen to the people around you, but it's following that gut, it's following that intuition and making that leap anyway. And luckily this one turned out really well. So yeah, we moved over here in April of 2000, which to me, I think I was quite young and malleable at that age, but I think to my parents was a bit of culture shocks, obviously very different, Middle East in that kind of era. But we settled in quite quickly. My schooling here was great. I went to DES, and it was one of the earlier days of DES. I think DES itself launched in the 60s, but compared to where we are
There might be
now,
some people that aren't in Dubai, so you just say
Sure,
what desk is.
Dubai English speaking, yeah. It's one of the original ones over in Satwa, and it was lovely. I really enjoyed it. It was a very grounded school. It was a British school, so I think that brought a little element of that homeliness. But for my parents, career-wise, my mum secured a job at a law firm here and stayed there for a couple of years. I think that was quite a grueling job, but it was that stepping stone into the UAE. And my dad worked, as I mentioned, for a marketing company. I can't, for the life of me, remember the name of it. But he then moved on. He worked at Wonderland. I don't know if you were around in Wonderland days. So he was then marketing manager at Wonderland.
Yeah, it's like a theme park.
Yeah, exactly. Theme park full of splinters and broken rides.
By the way, it was shut when I moved to the UAE, but I remember that it stayed as sort of a relic for a long time.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. I remember when it was thriving. It was a place of whimsy and dreams. It really was, but no more. So yeah, my mother then moved over to Al Tamimi, the law firm, and had a very, very, very successful career at Al Tamimi. She's a big inspiration for me. Very, very powerful, intelligent, well-collected woman, who back in those days as well, in the early 2000s, as a British woman in Dubai, excuse my French, but took no shit and really moved up through the ladder and ended up as head of property law and a senior partner at Al Tamimi, which I found amazing watching that growing up. My dad he then moved into hospitality here, hospitality management with AD&H Compass. He then left AD&H in 2008 and started his own company called Acuro. So, both my parents quite entrepreneurial. The chats over the dinner table every night will work. At the time, obviously, hated it. Now that I'm older, I see quite a lot of value there. I'm sure I picked up a few nuggets. But yeah, my dad started his company Acuro when I moved to boarding school. I started secondary school here, but I joined the school the year it opened, and it just hadn't matured to the point that it was ready for students, if I'm honest with you. I won't name it. So yeah, it was quite interesting. My dad started that company as I kind of left the country for boarding school, and following that journey from afar. But he also found great success with that company, and they both retired at the age of 50, back in 2015, I believe, from memory. It might have been earlier than that. Apologies to my parents for got that age
Mhm.
wrong.
Well,
So-
retiring at 50 is pretty
Yeah.
impressive, right?
Yeah.
And that makes them 60 now and loving their life now.
Yeah, exactly. They were very, they always say they were very lucky.
Yeah.
I would like to think it wasn't only luck,
Yeah.
because I'd like to think I have some control over how that turns out for myself. But yeah, they had a very, very successful career here. And I think that taking that leap for them really paid off.
I think the
time.
take homes from that are, a lot of people talk to me going, "Hey, Justin, you got into the UA early. I came 17 years ago."
Yeah.
And I will say that we were able to set up our recruitment business when there was like 5 or 6 others.
Yeah.
Now, where LinkedIn told me there's 450 that have opened in the past year just in the UAE. So
I would believe that.
So it's, it tells you what a different landscape it was. But they had the guts to go and put themselves in that position.
Exactly. Yeah.
They took you with it. No doubt, like you must have picked up on so many pioneering, mad things that were going on in your life then.
Yeah.
Clearly, you're a risk taker, hence why we're having this conversation. Clearly, they're risk takers.
Yeah, exactly.
Although the interesting thing is, one took the corporate route, became a partner in the firm.
Yeah.
What was your father's business?
So he ran a Cura. They were hospitality and sports specialists. So they did catering, cleaning, security for hospitals, schools, that kind of area.
Probably one of the few businesses out here that did that at the time, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah. He, as I understand, there were only a few competitors in the space.
Yeah.
And because of his position at his previous company, he had a very good understanding of the market, and a good understanding of how that industry moved, if you will. So he was able to really capitalize on that and make a big impact quite quickly.
George, when I first came out here, people used to say to me, when I used to go back home, my mum lives in a small village in Surrey. When I used to go back home, people, same old faces in the pub. All they'd ever say to me is, "So when you coming back?" First thing they open up, always, "When you coming back?"
Is that presumption, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, can you get me a job out here? Can I come out? So there was a very different sort of perception.
It's been a big shift,
of the golf. So you went to boarding school in the UK.
Correct.
Where'd you go?
Malvern College in the West Midlands.
Nice, lovely. And then you went to university in
Australia initially. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you go to Australia?
So I actually started scuba diving here when I was 10 years old.
Oh, so scuba diving is one.
Correct. Yeah. I've been a scuba diver my entire life. It's something that I always found a lot of purpose in, and as a kid, a lot of personality and character in as well. So I as I mentioned, started scuba diving when I was 10, and the PADI actually as an organization for me at that age was very frustrating because you can't just progress up the levels. You have to be a certain age, and I'm sure there's a good reason for that. But you can't do your advanced until you're 13. I did it a week into my 13th year of living. Can't do your rescue until you're 15, and then 16, then 18. So I always made sure to do all the courses like as soon as I possibly could. And then when I was 18, became a scuba diving instructor. So since the age of about 12 or 13, I said, I'm going to be a marine biologist. That's my route. That's what I'm doing. My first tattoo is a big, underwater tattoo on my back. I was really committed to it. And then, I lived in Thailand for 6 months and became a scuba diving instructor. And, I knew that the next step was university. I just didn't know when or how that was going to pan out. I knew it was marine biology somewhere. I just didn't know. I didn't know what the plan looked like. And within 6 months of being in Koh Tao, as great as it was, I realized that purpose had very quickly fallen out of my life, and I was just on repeat day after day.
That place is it. It's easily done.
Yeah. You get lost.
I lived there for a bit. This is why.
There you go.
I didn't tell you this.
So then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I was there for 6 months. I was supposed to be there for 6 months. I got to month 5 and I was like, okay, I'm done. This is. I actually felt like I was wasting away a bit.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, a scorpion bite led to an infection, and I was out the water for a month, and that's when I first started filming and editing properly. I had a couple of friends who were travel filmmakers, if you were, and they kind of traveled around with GoPros and made edits. So they were teaching me how to use, at the time, actually, it was iMovie and then Final Cut Pro with a bit of After Effects. So that was actually the first time I really started to take editing seriously, which was an interesting caveat. But after 5 months, I needed to go and get on with my life. I really felt like I was very stagnant, and so I applied to James Cook University in Australia, in Townsville, which applied to that one specifically, as well as one in Hawaii. But eventually, James Cook was the obvious choice just because of its proximity to the Great Barrier Reef. And I remember, I moved over there. My parents came with me, and that was my first a kind of taste of big boy life where, set up a bank account, bought a car, had to sort out accommodation and insurance and all that kind of stuff. So they came over and helped me out with that. And I was very, very excited up until the first red flag for me. We had the first lecture of the year, and we had 500-ish brand new marine biology students on the Great Barrier Reef. And the lecturer said, okay, so by show of hands, who here is a qualified scuba diver? And in a room of about 500 people, how many people do you think put their hand up?
Well,
I'm actually intrigued now.
You're making it sound like there's not going to be many.
Yeah, I want to see to what extent you take that.
I'm going to say 10.
It was about 15, I think.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And then one step further from that was who's a professional diver, which would be dive master or above, myself and one other person.
Wow.
And that was my first sign of like, hold on, that doesn't track in my head. You're here to study the underwater world and you can't even access it, which is very strange. So yeah, I mean, I did a year in marine biology, and it wasn't at all what I thought it would be. I went out onto the reef once, but that was for work outside of the university course. And a lot of it was very lab based. And a lot of it also brought back maths and chemistry, which I'd given up at GCSEs. In the UK, you only need 3 A levels to access university. In Australia, you continue 7 subjects, or it might be 5, all the way up until the end of school. So they said, well, you've got to do your core maths and chemistry, which is stuff that I had worked very hard to learn for GCSE. I got my good grade, luckily, and then when done with that, I'd forget about it. And then I had to relearn it all, and I'm not academically gifted at all. School was a struggle for me. So having to relearn all of that, plus being in a lab and not out on the ocean, and in all honesty as well, I was a young kid on my own in Australia, so the party life takes over a little bit as well. And the combination of all of that meant that I studied 8 subjects in my first year, and I failed all 8 of them.
Okay.
But at that point, I was in Australia. I had some great friends, and my life was there. So I convinced my parents, much to their behest at the time, I believe, to let me continue in Australia and change direction and do a year of business. So I started a Bachelor of Business, and to this day, I'm not an accountant. Physically, I am. Up here, I'm not. Nor am I legal. And we can touch on this later with the company. Obviously, I'm doing all those things at the moment, but studying them was not at all for me. Luckily, however, I did pass 2 of my 8 subjects in my business degree. And my parents said, look, this is getting silly, because obviously they were funding all of this. I wasn't eligible for any loans or grants or anything like that. And rightly so, they said, no, I'm sorry, this isn't working. You're going to have to come back to Dubai and we'll find a new route. To which I said, look, yeah, fair enough. An interesting story around that, actually. For my 21st birthday, my parents bought me my Category A and my AFF skydiving license. And it was day 1 of the course. And your first jump, I don't know if you know this, but is a solo jump. You don't have to do a tandem.
Right.
You literally just jump out of a plane on your own and figure it out, essentially. And I was out at Skydive Dubai, the desert campus, and I got an email saying you failed 6 of your 8 subjects. We're not welcoming you back to the university. And I thought about it. I remember very clearly thinking about it, watching skydivers come in and going, do I tell my parents now? Or do I jump and then tell my parents? And I decided that I needed a clear head before I jumped. So I called them and I said, guys, look, I'm really sorry, but I've got some bad news. And I'm very lucky that my parents are very supportive. And I thought they were going to be effing and blinding, but they weren't. They were very, very understanding. They said, look, that is really difficult. We're going to have to find a new route, but we'll sit down, we'll talk about it, we'll work it out. And for me, obviously, that was a big relief. So I went and jumped out of the plane on my own. And it was a weird day. Very, very strange day. But looking back, a very pivotal day, I think, in my journey.
And you enjoyed the jump, obviously.
Loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely loved it.
So I'm seeing a bit of a trend. Obviously, we've got diving, we've got skydiving.
Yeah.
There's, this is, and obviously the business that you've now got. Yeah. There's a passion there.
Huge, yes. Absolutely.
And clearly, like with the support, you've got a very supportive set of parents there.
Correct, yeah.
So what happened then? Did you have a conversation with them about, look, this is what I'm passionate about, or did they know that already?
At that stage, no. At that stage, I had started freelance photography. I did a little bit of it in Australia. My mum introduced me to photography when I was 14, and skateboarding introduced me to filmmaking when I was 13. So it was always kind of on the fringes I did A-level photography in school. Swapped actually maths A-level for photography A-level without telling my parents.
Yeah.
So I'd done a little bit of photography for fun leading up to kind of turning into an adult around 18, 19. And then in Australia, I got a job at a nightclub doing nightclub photography, which in a small far north town in Australia, I wouldn't recommend. Lots of drinks thrown, lots of cursing and blinding there. And I had thought about the potential of a career in photography. And I'd been to a few seminars and I'd started trying to develop my photography a bit further, but it was quite an opaque, daunting concept that I didn't really understand. So the first gig I did was for my mum's law firm. I said, look, I just want to know if I'm at a stage where I could actually pursue this or not. So I spoke to their marketing team. I said, look, you don't have to pay me at all, but give me an assignment, give me something to do. I will then produce against your brief. And I'd like to see whether you think I'm up to scratch. So we did that. They gave me a very comprehensive list, actually. It was a lot more than I thought I was going to be doing, of, I think it was 113 sites throughout the UAE and a driver for the week. And they said, right, you tell them where you need to go. You've got to photograph all 113 of these locations because we're building a new bespoke stock photography portfolio that we can use in our flyers and handouts and that kind of stuff. So I did all of that. And first of all, really enjoyed it. I felt like I was on a proper little mission for a whole week, which was great. And I gave them the photos and they were so happy that they ended up insisting on paying me 1,000 dirhams. And for me, I was like, whoa, hold on. At this point I was making, I think 200 dirhams a night, maybe, at this bar in Australia. So suddenly 1,000 dirhams was big money for me. And that really did open up the doors there.
That's about $200, right?
Yeah, it was 200 and yeah, I was being paid $50 a night, 2 nights a week.
Yeah.
It was hours. It was a 4-hour shoot every night and then 6 hours sat on my laptop the next day. So the pay was actually atrocious. I think it might have been below minimum legal, actually. Anyway, these things happen. So, I'd worked out that's kind of what I wanted to do. And I had done a couple of smaller shoots with The Fridge. Do you know The Fridge in Al Sakab?
Yeah.
I'd done some events with them and they were fantastic to work with. They were a very lively, exciting team. And that really, A, built my confidence because I felt like I was capturing very creative images and everybody was very happy with them. But B, it kind of opened my eyes. So, okay, now there quite possibly is something here. I just need to find a route. So I actually got a call one random Friday night from a friend who had been invited to by another friend to some party in Jumeirah. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Sounds good. And I brought my camera. And
was the purpose to party or to photograph?
To party and to photograph. Okay. You can do both.
Yeah.
I promise you can do both.
Okay.
Not if someone's paying.
Yeah.
But otherwise you can definitely do both.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like pool. When you're playing pool, you have like 4 or 5 beers and you get to that point where you're like, I'm killing this. And then you have that 6th and it all goes away. Yeah. Photography is the same. I promise it's exactly the same. So I went to this party and sat outside and I overheard a conversation. A couple of guys were talking about a short film that somebody was making. So I kind of shuffled over and joined into this conversation. And essentially, there was a guy by the name of Brock Keller, who had just finished his film degree and was working on his first short film. So I spoke to him. I said, look, do you want me to come along and do some behind the scenes photography? Again, just trying to find my feet. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. So we linked over, might have been WhatsApp or something at the time, can't remember. And a week later, I was on location with him, doing the behind the scenes photography. And this film was, it was very experimental for Dubai. It was very kind of cult driven, a bit of an unreal world, a bit surreal. It was, very, very cool. And I was on location on this set for about 10 minutes before I was like, whoa, okay, this is it. This is everything I want in my career. This is what I need to do. So I finished the shoot, went well. We actually came across one of the photos a few days ago, and went home to my parents and said, guys, I know exactly what I want to do. I know it's a big risk, and I know I'm asking you to pay for university again, but I promise you this time I've got it. This is it, 100%. I promise you this is it. And so that's what I did. I was in film school 2 months later.
Whereabouts?
Here in Dubai at SAE, which was actually the school that Brock had just graduated from. It was pretty much the only option here at the time. And yeah, I mean, the rest of that's history, really. I studied film here, did all I could to make sure that I was being proactive outside of university, because here film school is very, how do I say this politically, surface level, let's say. You know, you really do have to take it into your own hands and get outside and shoot your own stuff. And yeah, so I graduated film school. Brock never actually knew I even had this epiphany or went to film school. Film school here was really good. I quickly gravitated towards the documentary vein of things. We made a few documentaries and we won a few awards while I was at film school. From there, really just wanted to learn a lot more about documentary. Really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of what makes a good documentary film, because to me, to this day, I find documentaries very boring when they're not made properly or they're not a topic I'm interested in. I wanted to learn and distill really the DNA that makes up an interesting documentary and how you write that and then more so bring it to the screen. So I went off to film school, went on to Victorian College of the Arts, which is a subsidiary of Melbourne University in Australia. Graduated my Masters of Film actually during COVID, which was an interesting one, especially because Australia was not locked down. So I was graduating film and had all this freedom of I could do whatever I wanted in Australia.
You couldn't get in and out of the country though.
No.
Yeah.
You know, I was stuck there, but I was okay with that. You know, I just graduated film and I didn't have a job. I was good to go. I was just skateboarding every day, which was great. So after that, moved back to Dubai with a brief stint. It's a bit of a side story. My parents lived in San Diego at the time. I moved over there to work out what I was going to do next. Originally, it was going to be Amsterdam because there's a big documentary scene there. And I have a good friend who lived there. So I was going to go and live on his sofa and find a job. But their borders were still closed. So my parents and I came to this realization that it's, you pick Dubai, England. I don't think I have to spell that one out for you. Pretty straightforward, decision to be made there. So I came back to Dubai. And upon doing so, I actually reached out to Brock again. And I mean, two funny things there. First of all, he had no idea I'd been on this journey or that it was because of him. But he also didn't know that as kind of a recognition of the power of that film he made, I got the logo of it tattooed on my arm. So I met up with him, we had a drink, and I said, well, first, we didn't know I had that. So there you go. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And we caught up and, we've been very, very close friends ever since. He's now my business partner. He's our creative director. We work fantastically together. So that's been quite a serendipitous, fun little journey we've been on.
Gotcha.
In and out of different projects and stuff like that. It's been great.
So what advice would you give to anyone? I mean, from that journey that you've learned there, there's people watching this going, I don't know what to do. My parents are telling me I should be studying this. It sounds like you went through a bit of a battle, and through it, you found your passion and eventually convinced your parents to take you on that journey. Just give us some, what advice would you give to people?
I think it's a tough one. And I think there are two separate elements to that. I think, firstly, being lost in your cause and your purpose in life is something that everybody goes through to some extent at some point. And I think that a lot of people see that as very daunting and negative and scary, which it is. And I understand that. But I think that there's also a lot that you can learn about yourself in that process, because you're lost at sea on your own with no direction. And it puts you in your head a lot. And it really makes you question everything realistically. And I think anybody that's listening that's in that situation will probably be nodding along, because everybody tries to help, everybody tries to give advice. And when you don't know what you want, all that advice is very lackluster, and it makes you question, do I trust this person? Are they offering me the right advice? Are they a good friend? Are they a good family member? Whatever it might be. And it can get very dark. But I think realistically in that scenario, and when you are in that situation, I think it's important to remember that, at the end of that tunnel is purpose, and it is that career or that direction, that fulfillment and passion. It's a matter of finding it. And the process of finding it is one of the most valuable things I've ever been through in my life. And I say that with my hand on my heart because it's true. And I think that it's a time to really listen to yourself, your intuition, not rule anything out, and delve into what sets your soul on fire. Forget the career, forget the work. For you on that day or that week, that month, what is it that excites you? What is it that you look at and you feel that little fluster? I'm sure you felt that as well. And to me, it's that, and it's listening to that. And I think that a big block in my story, at least, for example, was with photography. I felt it, But I was like, this can't be a career. I'm not a photographer. I'm not a creative. I don't have any qualifications. I don't know anybody that does it. I don't, and it's very far removed from what my parents did with the corporate world. So it was daunting. And it was only in listening to that and moving into that creative world that I kind of went, no, this is it, And so I think a lot of it is just spending that time on your own and going through those darker thoughts in your head and processing them, accepting them, pushing them to a side, and looking at what light is left remaining and looking at what the source of that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that will provide a lot of direction.
What was your eureka moment?
Oof.
What was that? Because you said like let your soul speak to you. It was quite profound what you said then. There's a lot of people might be going, well, how do I do that?
Yeah. It's a bit wishy-washy, yeah. Well, the funny thing about that is a lot of that obviously is hindsight. And I don't understand that doesn't
obviously
help.
there was a trigger, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like that conversation with Brock. I'm pointing because Brock's over there.
Yeah. Brock is...
it sounds like that overhearing that conversation was a real big moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously my eureka moment is very specific to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whoever else has one, it will be the same. But for me, on location on this film set, we had 20 plus people running around, everybody with their own job. We were in the production team had paid a tiny little supermarket in the back streets of Garhoud, like 100 dirhams that I shoot there. And we had just taken over this market, and we were, I was watching the team bring this world to life inside this little supermarket. And as a behind-the-scenes photographer, I was in a very unique vantage point where I didn't have to deal with anything. It was just me and my camera. All I had to do was observe. And it was in watching that I went, you know what? This is just cool. That's just it. I mean, and whenever I looked at what any one person was doing, including the acting, I was like, I would happily be in any of those roles because I love what's being created here. And I think it was that for me. I think it was that. And it was just, it just, something in my head just clicked. Like the first time you understand algebra, it just made sense all of a sudden. Nor do I. But yeah, to me, it just clicked in my head, and it was clear to me that's what I wanted to do.
So we're at a point now where you run your own business.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it sounds like you've pursued your passion. You got back from Australia again.
Yeah.
Come back to Dubai, and you've been freelancing. You start freelancing.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And then you go set up your own business. Like, let's just help us understand.
Yeah, it's a bit of a jump.
Yeah, jump happened.
Yeah, it was an interesting one, really. I mean, I think as I mentioned at the start, being a freelancer, you really do get to see the ins and outs and the guts of the industry. And interesting enough, from a vantage point of being an employee almost for a day or 3 days at many different production companies and agencies and stuff like that. So freelancing here for me at first was very difficult because, moving over here fresh with a limited showreel, a limited portfolio because I've been studying, and not a massive network, it's quite difficult to establish yourself in the industry here, especially as a freelancer. And I think it's very exponential. As you do more work, your portfolio grows, your your showreel builds, and then you get more work, and it kind of builds that way. So at first it was unfortunately very much a penny grabbing thing. I needed to make some money. I needed to pay my bills and pay my rent, and it was a necessity thing. So I took anything and any job that I could possibly get. And then as relationships build, you start being called back by the same people, you start working on the same projects, whether that's a monthly thing, a yearly thing, whatever it might be. And you do build these relationships. And for me, I really enjoyed that. But because that is in itself quite entrepreneurial, I think that a lot of people downplay freelancing, but freelancing, in my mind at least, I don't know if you agree, is a very entrepreneurial pursuit because you have to work everything out on your own.
Well, particularly in your field, you're a one person business already,
Yeah,
and
precisely.
You're only as good as your last gig, right?
Exactly.
So, in a market this size where reputation stands for everything, you do a bad job,
that's it.
You're out.
Oh yeah. Very, very quickly. And I've seen it happen. So, I mean, for me, freelancing was a great gig, and it took I would say probably about 2 years, get to a point where I was earning what we would consider probably quite a low salary, but a livable salary. You know, I was able to stand on my own 2 feet, which was fantastic. And coming off of being a student, that was like the first time I could say that, because I couldn't work while I was a student here because of a student visa, and I couldn't work in Australia because of a student visa. So, you know, to be able to make my own money and be an independent in that way felt amazing. And that lasted about 3 months before I started RAPT and Alienated.
So you got on your own
client
okay.
base.
So you got on your own 2 feet.
Yeah.
You've established yourself as an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And all of a sudden you think, you know what, I'm going to go and set up a business.
Yeah, not quite.
Come on, man.
Almost.
What's going on there?
No, I
What have you been drinking?
So yeah, I always knew that I wanted to start a business. And I think that's something that came to me as a child, maybe even. That's probably a bit of a lie. Probably teenagers watching these conversations with my parents over dinner. And I always knew that that's where I wanted to go. And I think freelancing, to me at least, was quite a natural stepping stone in that direction. Because like we discussed, you are starting to hone those skills and understand what it's like to do things on your own, what it's like to fail on your own, I think is a big one. So I knew that I wanted to start a company, and I knew that the starting point of that was a business plan. From the very little that I actually did manage to learn at business school, I knew that that was something I had to do, you know, your SWOT analysis and all that kind of stuff. So as I was freelancing, when I wasn't on shoot, I was at home working on a business plan. You know, and because I hadn't done it, it was scary, and we needed investment to start the company. The business plan was a very, very thorough document. You know, from memory, it was 28 pages, I think, by the time I was done. Knowing that the company would start, and it would be just me and one other person. So I put a lot of effort into that, went through many iterations of that, and in doing so, I think fleshed out a lot of the thoughts I had about the company and about what I wanted RAPT to look like, and more so what I wanted RAPT to represent. And, you know, here in the UAE, we have, I think similar to your industry, we have a rapidly growing number of production companies here in the UAE or in the GCC generally. And they, in my eyes, many of them, for all of the talent that is here, fall under one kind of very large umbrella where it's kind of, you know, that they all do a bit of everything. You know, they'll shoot photography, they will do film and animation, they all do a little bit of banking, a little bit of hospitality, a little bit of property, a little bit of interviews, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, you know. And I looked at that and went, no, I'm not going to succeed if I go that route, because there's just no leg to stand on as a young business. You've got to have something to make you different. And looking at that market, I was like, we're going to drown instantly. You know, there's not a chance. That first year, cash is king. To get the cash, we need to get the jobs. To get the jobs, we need to be able to compete. We're not going to be able to compete with these guys because lots of these companies are 20 years old. You know, they have teams of 30 plus people. They have this huge show reel. And especially here, they've worked with Will Smith and Kevin Hart and David Beckham, and they did this massive project and that massive project. So if I come in and go, hi, new company, you know, we got a bit of work, there's not a chance. So, you know, I flagged that as an issue very early on. And I had surrendered myself to the fact that if I couldn't find a solution to that, we would really struggle in those early days. So that was one of the big kind of problems that I needed to overcome when I was writing that business plan. And then the second, as I touched on earlier, you know, I think we have such talent in the creative industry here. Like truly, some of the most talented people in the world are in the creative industry here. But I think what lacks over a lot of it is passion. You know, it is the dying of that light, because, you know, people enter a creative industry, whether that be, you know, writing, poetry, singing, painting, pottery, whatever it is, because they feel that passion. And I think that over here in the UAE, we're in quite a unique situation, really, because, you know, if you're in the UK and you have an idea for a TV show, you write it all up, you go to BBC, you go to Channel 4, you pitch it to them. If they like it, they give you funding and you're off. That doesn't exist here, which means that those core creative pursuits are very hard to fund here, which means they don't happen. So when you remove all of that, what's left here in the UAE is a very commercial market. And there typically is not much passion there. So we see these very creative people move over here. They quickly realize that those truly creative pursuits are they're either going to have to do as a side hustle and not make any money on them, or they have to give them up and use the skill set that they have, be that writing, directing, shooting, editing, to service that commercial side of the market, because it's the only way you're going to make ends meet. But obviously, when that happens en masse over time, it leaves a creative industry that, unfortunately, for the best part, is quite devoid of passion. And you can see it on any of the projects, the big kind of famous projects here in the UAE. If you go and look at the behind the scenes, you can actually see it. People are disengaged. They're not interested. They're on phones or nattering or whatever. And that to me is pointless, because if the passion's not there in a creative industry where it's very hard to make money, it's very competitive, it's very, very hard work, it's long days, it's grueling. If you're not doing it for passion, doing it for money, then retrain, go and pursue something that is going to pay well. Or in fact, here in Dubai, go and be a real estate agent. You will make more money.
Yeah, I think that's easy to say though, because obviously you're in an expensive part of the world.
Yeah.
Businesses need money to survive.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's very hard just to tell someone to go and pursue their passions if those passions don't pay the bills, right?
Very tough. Yeah.
So, but what you've tried, the take home that I'm getting from this is quite an important message is that you saw that if you were to launch as a generalist,
yes,
you would just be another business.
Correct. Probably a failed one.
Okay. And what you saw was that there was a gap for you to be. And how would you position your production company? What would you say you guys are?
There are two key elements to that. One being we are the GCC's only sports specialized production company. There isn't another one.
Yeah.
And second, as a production agency, we do things a bit differently, where typically the pipeline in any production is made up of three parties. You have the end client, who could be somebody like, GMG or Jeep. And then in the middle, you have an agency. And then at the end, you have the production house. And the agency sits in the middle and therefore has a lot of power in that dynamic.
It's like a broker.
Essentially, yeah. And they typically write the creative. They come up with the concept ideation, they write the script, they do the storyboarding. When it gets approved by the end user, they then take that brief that they've written to the production company. And I could talk to you about that for hours. Then that dynamic is a very difficult and complex dynamic to navigate. And typically, the agency that's in the middle struggle to provide value because of lack of specialism. They don't, obviously an agency is not going to hire full-time a qualified scriptwriter. It would make no sense. Nor are they going to hire a storyboard artist or, a director even. Typically, they're more on the analytical side of things. But if they're going to take their chunk of cash out of the pot and be that middleman, they have to provide some value. And often that comes in the form of that ideation and writing. And what that leaves the production company with is a brief that they read, and it's happened to us, that you read it and you go, I see what they're going for, but I just don't think it'll work. I mean, many examples of it, but one of them would be they might be trying to fit 5 minutes of narrative into a 1-minute video. And the production company can look at that and say, that just doesn't work. But the production company will still say yes to it because they need the work, So something that we do differently is that we are an agency and a production company in one. We have in-house the script writing capabilities. So we do the ideation and the script writing, the storyboarding, and we go direct to clients and we remove that agency in the middle. And what that means is that the end client gets a faster project, a more fiscally efficient project, and the concept that's discussed in that very first meeting is the concept that is the final deliverable that you see come the conclusion of a project. And that was also a very unique framework, if you will, in our industry.
And you saw these gaps from doing freelance work for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay. So finding a niche, that's something that I'll always say is, if you are the only specialist in your area in the GCC, before anyone sees a proposal from you, they're gonna be leaning towards you because they're going to know that you are an expert in their space. So I think that's a really powerful message.
I mean, it's allowed us to compete against, heritage companies here.
I mean, that's a really important message there. The second thing is that you're cutting out the middle person. You're saving people money and time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you learned all of that in the 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think I had inklings of it from when I was at university here.
Yeah.
But it's, I think when you're in preparation to start a new venture, your job is to be very aware.
Yeah.
I was kind of doing two jobs on every project. I
Yeah.
was on one hand the freelancer, I was the photographer, the camera operator, the editor. On the other hand, I was that entrepreneur that was writing that business plan. So the other part of my job was to observe.
Yeah, you were seeing opportunity. It's great. It's great. So, okay, you decide you're going to go register a business.
Yeah.
You said you've got a business plan. You needed investors.
Yes.
Did you manage to raise money?
Yes, we did. We did a family and friends round.
Okay.
Yeah.
Went well?
Yeah. We were very streamlined because I was very aware, obviously, at the start that cash was going to be king. And as I mentioned earlier, especially for that first year, if we run out of cash, the company's done. That's it.
Yeah.
It's pretty black and white. So we were very, very efficient. And it's something that I planned for, that we would be a very organic, grassroots, slow grow company, because I wasn't really in a rush. I don't really have any interest in being the production company that pulls in 10 million dirhams a year. I have an interest in being the production company that works on projects that they love, and that those projects pay enough that the company remains and grows steadily. That to me is the end goal. We're not, I've said it to many clients, and I will continue to say it. We're not a profit-driven company. We're a passion-driven company. And I know that most people, I'm sure including you in your head, are thinking bullshit. Fair enough. But if that weren't true, we would be pursuing working with hotels, we'd be pursuing working with restaurants, we'd be pursuing working with, all of these things that are outside of our niche. And it's just not something that we do.
Okay.
So, I do think that is quite important. So when we took on, quite a small amount of investment to start, it essentially covered startup cost. It covered office rent for the first year, licensing, equipment that we needed in-house, furnishing the office that we're in now, and that was it. There was no marketing budget. There was no budget for salaries. Me and my business partner were on profit share at the time. The first 6 months we made nothing. We pocketed 500 dirhams each or something. But at least we knew that we had a year. The rent was done. The licensing was done. We had all the equipment in the office, which is obviously, your camera equipment, your FX6s, the lights, the microphones, everything you need to film. And we had an office. And that was pretty much it. And from there, we just bootstrapped it.
2 questions.
Please.
First one. If you're going to go and raise money
Yes.
from an investor,
Yeah.
how do you raise money for an investor if you say you're not a profit-driven business? Because
that's entirely
I get a lot of people come to me looking for investment. And I've invested in a few things before.
Sure.
Like, being perfectly honest with you, if that was your pitch deck,
you'd say no.
I would turn you down.
No, I understand.
So how did you raise money saying I'm not a profit-driven business, I'm a passion-driven business?
Because I think I was able to sell the belief that profit will follow passion. I think based on what we're doing and the niche that we're in, I think the core values of our company are what's going to really help us grow into those bigger projects that I had mentioned previously. And for us as well, like a big chunk of that was CSR. I started filmmaking or documentary because I saw it as a really powerful medium for positive change in the world, and I stand by that. So we engage in CSR activities to remind us of that core. And I think that by following passion, it keeps us whole. I think that's the key to it. And it makes sure that the why of the company, not necessarily of myself, but of the company, remains intact. And as long as that is there, that's what allows you to keep pushing, because it's the pursuit of that passion project or the next passion project that will keep you pushing. So I think, obviously there was a lot of accounting in the business plan. There was a lot of analyses and understanding of where our opportunities might be and how we were going to bring in money, and, how investors would see that money return over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, or can't remember the time frame now, but around there. So that was addressed. But I think it was addressed to the point that it was consolidated, and then we moved on to why the company would succeed. And I think it was a belief in that, realistically. And like I said, we weren't asking for 10 million dirhams.
Yeah.
We weren't even asking for $1 million.
Okay.
It was a very, very tight startup budget.
Got you. How do you survive on 500 dirhams a month in Dubai?
You don't really.
Where do you live?
I lived in. I essentially just lived with my parents.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, they have an apartment.
Where's Brook live?
Brock wasn't with us at that point.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. My parents had an apartment in the Greens that they had up for rent. So I
I was going to say, if you know a secret to the world's cheapest.
No,
place on the web.
no. I wish. Yeah, that would make my life a lot easier.
I've spent more on Waitrose.
Exactly.
You know, that's a very tough place to live on that.
It is.
know.
Yeah. I mean, I sold my car in Australia. Had a bit of money left from that. Rented a car here.
Got you.
I lived in my parents' place in the Greens. And then just spent no money.
Okay.
I wasn't going out. All the Dubai lifestyle that people think was not me in the slightest. I wasn't going out drinking. I wasn't going out brunching. I didn't party. And if I did, it was at home. And I would buy a bottle of wine or some beer.
Sounds a bit depressing if I'm honest.
It was. No, it was. But
I mean, drinking on your own. No.
No.
The work
It wasn't necessarily on my own. It was at home.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No.
But
look,
it's the pursuit of that greater purpose that pushes you through that kind of stuff.
You've got to make sacrifice. When I set up MCG, I lived in a shitbag room in my it was a tiny little studio room in my brother's place in Brixton.
Yeah.
My brother was a quite successful DJ,
Right.
And with a lifestyle that went with that.
Yeah.
As you can imagine,
yeah.
I was in the room trying to get a business going, and the whole house
Slightly distracting.
was rammed.
You were in your room drinking on your own.
Yeah, no. Fortunately, I wasn't. No, I'd get up in the morning, go to the gym, and go to work.
There you go.
But when I got up in the morning, they'd still be up.
Of course. Yeah.
Anyway, that's you've got to make those sacrifices.
Yeah, I think it's a part of it.
You've got to.
It is a big part of it.
Okay, so how did you go and get a client? Like you've you've got your niche sorted, you've got your investment sorted. It all sounds great. Now you need some business.
Yeah.
How did you go and get that?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I think I knew rather going into this, that as soon as I launched a company, my clientele that I was servicing at the time as a freelancer would very quickly vanish because I would become a competitor. So, I just gotten to a point where I was making that very barely livable salary. But that was as a gun for hire for other production companies. So I knew that I'd be back to square one when I started this company, but I also knew I didn't really need any money. I was, like I said, I was living in my parents' place in the Greens. I had a car. That was it. I didn't, and that was fine. I was ready to not travel and buy things and, go out for dinners and stuff for years if it needed to be, then that's how it is. So when I started the company, you are entirely correct. We had 0 clients, which again is quite a unique model. A lot of people who start production companies here worked in another one for 10 years. They get really high up, they leave and they take clients with them. I wish I did that. That would have made a lot more sense, but that's not how it works. So, I find the question of how did I get my clients very difficult. I don't know if I've blocked it all out in my brain just because of how hard it was, or because it was just so scattered. But honestly, it was cold calls, emails, WhatsApps, going on websites, literally going and knocking on potential clients' doors in person. And from there, it was just graft and conversation. That's all it really was. It was trying to convince those first few clients to just take that risk, and say, look, I promise you this is going to be great. But obviously when you don't have that, we had a bit of a portfolio. We had a few kind of brands that we could stick on our website from freelance work between me and my ex-business partner at the time. And it was just a lot of hard work, a lot of why the hell have I done this? But I think a lot of it's turning that into motivation. It's being able to flip that on its head and go, you know what, this does suck. This is really difficult. I need to get out there and make it easier. And it was that, like I mentioned, it was, a lot of time on LinkedIn, trying to make connections, and a lot of emails and a lot of reaching out to anybody who I might have already known just because I've grown up here, and trying to kind of convert that way. And bit by bit, it started to happen. It did. One of the founding members of the company, not a partner, but a founding member, was a guy called Ed. He's still with us at the moment. He's head of our drone department. He joined because he was a drone pilot, but nowadays, because of legislation, you can't be a freelance drone pilot. So I said, look, we worked something out where essentially we paid for licensing and he would be our pilot, and we would hire him on at preferable rates. and he would grow the drone department as part of the company. And he brought in, was much to my shock at the time, and appreciation, our first proper job, which was with one of his old clients, an agency here called QComs. They were servicing a client, Columbia sportswear company, and they had a job where they needed us to go and shoot a social media campaign out in Saudi Arabia. And I was gobsmacked. This was travel. It was on brand. It was within our niche. We'd be out in the middle of nowhere. I'd never been to Saudi before. And the budget was, from memory, like 40,000 dirhams. And to me at the time, I wasn't making that in 3 months as a freelancer. So to me, I was mind blown. Obviously, there were costs on that, indirect and direct. But regardless, that was money that was coming into our account. And that was crazy. So I think that was that early on, that happened before we even had our soft launch in the office, actually. I think before we even had our bank account. And I think that looking back, that was really needed. That was the first bit of you can do this. Just keep pushing. You got this.
So that was the moment where you thought you're onto something.
Yeah. Because again, we might have had a website at the time. We definitely didn't have Instagram. We had a very underwhelming show reel. We still hadn't worked out any of the kinks, really. So the fact that we were able to win this gig based purely on the fact that we were sports specialized, it's okay, there is something here, because that was the only leg that we could stand on. We didn't have anything else. That was it.
And how have you got business since then?
Since then, referrals been quite a big one. Networking. I'm a very talkative person. I love meeting people and chatting. One of my biggest philosophies, I think, has done me really well actually over the years, is I hate online calls. Can't do them. Especially when you meet somebody for the first time, you've got to make a good impression. It's so important. And I'm sure that you're the same. And I've seen a real trend with the successful entrepreneurs and people who prefer face-to-face. We're all busy. I get it. But I think because of that, it makes a big impact when you insist on taking time out of your day to go somewhere and meet somebody for a coffee. So yeah, it's been a lot of that. And I think that we internally, especially, so Brock joined us as creative director coming up on a year ago now. And we've seen massive growth since then. He thinks it's him. I think it's coincidence. But a lot of it has been having Brock on board, and the conversations that we've been having internally about how to leverage what we've already got. I think a lot of it is, okay, cool, you've done this project. You can't now just be like, okay, job done and leave it and move on to the next. No, you've just created something with power. You created something that you can use to bring in that next project. So we've been very strategic about how we leverage previous projects. And as I said, with the freelance side of things, I think the same rings true for the business side of things, where it is exponential. Because once you start to complete these projects and you demonstrate reliability and accountancy across multiple projects, and again, you demonstrate quality work, a good ROI for your clients, you're getting good statistics on socials, on their channels, and on the projects you're creating. You've got to encase that and use that to demonstrate your ability to your next client. And for us, that's come in the form of website is a big one for us. Brock came on as creative director. The previous website, 15,000 dirhams of the startup fund was to get a website made. It was great. Loved it. The guy who made it did a great job, but it wasn't us. So we got rid of it. We started from scratch, Brock and I, on Wix for a month, just redoing the website. Company profiles are a big one, and making sure that you've got your case studies in there and you're demonstrating the return that people are getting on the projects you're creating. And making sure that you've got the materials. So when you do meet people, you can then you've got everything in your arsenal you need to demonstrate your skill set and your capabilities. And I think one of the biggest ones is people do business with people that they like. I think that's massively underrated here. I think everybody wants fast business, and good business in my mind is not fast. It's slow. It takes time. And it's about building that rapport. It's about being respectful. It's about being a good listener, making sure you're really understanding what your client is explaining to you, because at the end of the day, you're problem solving. If a company is reaching out to another company for something, it's because it's something they can't do, and you're solving that problem for them.
Got you.
So I think really trying to understand that and get to the core of that is really important. And finally, I think it's about not burning bridges. And when you don't win a job, why? And asking why. we've done it time and time again where we hear back and they say, look, we've decided to go with another company on this one. We'll be in touch with future projects. It's a very frustrating email to get, especially because we put a lot of time and work into our pitch decks when we're the ones coming up with the concept. And it's about putting ego to one side, and saying, look, I really appreciate you letting me know. I'd love to know what you felt fell short from our offering. And at this point, often price isn't even discussed. So it's not a pricing thing. Sometimes it is, rarely it is. But it's, look, what did you feel that we didn't have? And I think that's really, really crucial as well, because that knowledge and that information is something that is free and available to anybody who doesn't win a job. And I would guess, this is a guess, that only 10% of people actually try to access that information. But that information could be what makes or breaks your next proposal. So I think keeping that relationship healthy, keeping that bridge open, not burning it down, and extracting from that what you can and applying it to the next project is a big thing, because that's going to keep growing. It's going to keep learning and it's going to keep you evolving.
Gotcha. What has been the toughest part of running a business? And most businesses don't last 2 years.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's been your what's been the point where you nearly broke?
Yeah, been a few. A lot of it for me is a mental game, just how much of an absolute slog it was. I don't think I was prepared for that. I'm by nature quite an ambitious, optimistic, over the top kind of person. And I think that at times, whether that be a day, a week, a month, growing this company really did just drain that out of me, which I was not prepared for. And it's I can't remember who said it. There's some quote along the lines of, entrepreneurialism isn't a test of intelligence, it's a test of willpower. And it is that, and I think that it's in those times that you need your family, your friends to lean on for that support. So I think for me, that was a big one. Second would be all the bureaucratics around it. I still don't even know, for example, what health insurance I personally have. And so when you take that and apply it to a big business where people are relying on you, I just was not ready to be my own PRO, essentially. And again, we didn't have the startup fund to hire instantly a PRO or HR manager or anything like that. So when it came to working out the paperwork, the licensing, the insurance, the banking, all that kind of stuff, I didn't feel prepared at all. And I've learned a lot in the process of doing all of that on my own. Again, wish I had money to throw at somebody and just say, look, sort this out for me. But that was honestly the first 3 months of the company, was learning all that and getting it all set up. And then I think as well, it really brings to light a lot of your weaknesses. There are lots of areas of the company that I'm very comfortable with and that I feel I'm doing an adequate job with at the moment, and that for me is on the softer skill set side of things. I love talking to people and meeting people. I love networking. I wouldn't call it sales even, but trying to win those next gigs, that to me comes quite naturally. What doesn't is the accounting, the legal, all of those more hard skills that I just don't have. And I think that nearly broke me a few times, where I went, I can't even do this now. And we're only doing, back last year, we're only doing one job every other month or something. So even if we do grow, I'm setting myself up for complete failure. We're going to need to grow very quickly to the point that I have the financials available to bring somebody on to do this for me before I screw it up to a point that I bury the whole company. So that was another side of it, is making it became very apparent to me where my shortfalls were.
Gotcha.
And I think moving through that is a delicate space, but something that you need to do.
If we were to have this conversation in 2 years' time, what's your vision and where do you see the business at?
Oh, good question. So as I mentioned, for me, the driver of growth is the pursuit of bigger projects. We want to be working on think Red Bull style projects. I would like to work on international projects with world-class athletes in all kinds of scenarios and different disciplines. So for me, that's a driving force and that's a North Star. That's where we want to get to. We want to get to a point where we're rivaling Red Bull Media House, and I think that it's important to know what that end goal looks like, to then look, with a microscope at any point between now and that end goal. And in this scenario, 2 years, so that's a big one for us. And on top of that, in many markets around the world, you mention a market and there'll be a clear go-to or a few go-to companies that are well known. Even if it's not something that you're interested in, you could ask my mum, biggest tech companies in the world. Guarantee you she's going to say Apple, Google, Nvidia, Microsoft, for example. If I ask anybody about production, not a chance. And to me, that's mad as well. I'm amazed that we haven't gotten to a point with the love of sports in this world, be it football and your traditional sports, all the way through to, wingsuit flying. There is no one production company where they can put out a trailer and somebody goes, oh, that production company's put out a trailer, this is going to be great. Doesn't exist. We want to do that. So what does 2 years from now on that journey look like? Who knows? It's a muddled one. I think, I would like to see the team bigger because that increases our capabilities. And with that, we're very careful to hire a passionate team who cares about sport, because if they don't, it all falls apart, right? We can't have a DOP, for example, on set talking to a client, and we're on a set of, skateboarding, and they say, who's your favorite skater? And they say Tony Hawk, because I don't know. That quickly derails everything. So, I'd like to see a larger passionate team.
At least they'd say Tony Hawk, though.
Yeah, it's kind of just the go-to option, though, I think, really. If they said Ronaldo, we'd have a real problem.
Yeah.
But, yeah. So, I think for me, a big thing is the team. That's very, very important to me. It's the fact that we have a team that is passionate and knowledgeable about what they do. But for me as the business owner is that are they happy? Do they feel that like they are fulfilled in their creative pursuit? Because again, that's what sets us apart. Do they feel like they're fulfilled in their creative pursuit? Are they moving the direction they want to be moving in? Like when we hired Alex, he's our junior shoot editor, fantastic guy, 21 years old, very, very early on in his career. And, one of the big things that we discussed in the onboarding process was it's very important to me that you feel you have the freedom and the reign to move within our industry however you want. If you would like to be a director, which you're not now, we will help you get to that. If you want to be a producer, an editor, whatever it is, I will do everything in my power and I will use the company to move you in that direction. Because to me, I'm always thinking long run, and that's how you end up with true talent and true passion and dedication 5 years down the line when we really need it most, when we are servicing those big international jobs. We need to know that we've got a crew of people who are close-knit and some of the best at what they do. And I think that the way to do that is to really take care of them at this stage.
Okay. Now, we always end this podcast with asking our guest for what advice they would offer to an entrepreneur. What advice would you offer to budding entrepreneurs out there? So, and given you where you are in the stage of your business, I'm really interested in this answer.
Ooh. A lot coming to mind. I think because of RAPT and the company that it is, I would say that we are now in a world where you can follow a passion and grow something with it. I think back in the day, probably even before your day as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. No, that's all right. We're talking 1910s. I think back in the day, people followed a very traditional path. And I think that you had to really be a one-off to find a passion and turn it into a career. But I think nowadays, it's very much the opposite. And I'm more than happy to be proven wrong on this, but I feel like the 9 to 5 and that corporate climb the ladder is slowly on its way out. And I feel like there's a lot of evidence in our markets to demonstrate that. And I think that what's replacing that, obviously you can't create a vacuum. Something needs to replace or fill the void that leaves. And to me, that is the opportunity to pursue something that you truly care about with platforms like your podcast, YouTube, Instagram, a lot of people are influencers, that kind of thing. I'm not saying do that, but that's a good demonstration of how you can take something that means something to you, quirky, unique as it may be, and you can make something out of it. And I think that, especially when you're growing a business, you need something that's going to get you out of bed on the mornings where you wake up thinking, I can't do this. And to me, that's passion. And I think that will reign true for most people, because without it, you will I would have just given up.
Yeah. I think with passion has clearly been the secret sauce for your resilience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Listen, absolute pleasure having a chat to you
It's been
today.
fantastic.
Thank
Thank
you
much.
so much for sharing your journey.
Not a
We
problem at
are
all.
going to come back here in a couple of years. We're going to hold you.
All right.
Obviously we've got this recording. I'm going to send you what you said, and
Yeah.
we're going to see
That's it.
where you
I'm
stand to
intrigued.
that day.
Hopefully you can show it to some of my employees and ask them what they think. That'd be good.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please do tune in to see and listen to George's excellent story, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers now. Bye-bye.